Hola, Dr. Aisha here, your Spanish language coach. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. This week, I want to answer a common question that I receive almost on a daily basis. Which app is the best app to use to learn Spanish? So I have a question first. What is your goal? Do you want to have conversational Spanish with your child? Do you want to use Spanish at your job? What are your reasons for learning Spanish? These may seem like general questions, but they're very important to answer to know what's the best approach you should use in order to learn Spanish. I help parents teach their children Spanish even if they don't speak Spanish themselves. So my recommendation is I don't recommend an app. What I know is that apps do not help you learn conversational Spanish. Apps are a supplemental tool that should be used with a language learning program. They should not be used independently, or you should not expect to be able to have conversational Spanish by using an app regardless of the amount of time that you've used the app. Now, some of you may say, well, I find it beneficial and I'm moving up to so many different levels. Well, that's wonderful. You're learning a lot of vocabulary. But remember, language learning includes more than just isolated vocabulary words. What's important is being able to use those vocabulary words in complete sentences that are comprehensible to others, and being able to respond when people speak to you in that language. So, how can you use an app that will benefit you so that you can help your child learn Spanish? You want to look for an app that is scientifically designed and uses the spaced repetition method. The spaced repetition method is a scientific method that reintroduces previously learned vocabulary but extends the amount of time by which you see that vocabulary repeat itself. So that means that you are learning the vocabulary and more time is elapsing in between when you see the vocabulary repeated to jog your memory. The longer the amount of time between when you first learn the vocabulary word and when you naturally learn that vocabulary word and don't need any references means that you truly are learning that vocabulary. Now, as I mentioned, you don't want to learn vocabulary in isolation. That's no different than how you learn Spanish in high school. I'm pretty sure many of you remember memorizing long lists of vocabulary words based on specific topics, but you never had an opportunity to use those vocabulary words in complete sentences other than completing the exercises in your textbook. So I'll ask you, how well do you speak Spanish now? Do you remember all of those vocabulary words? Do you see why I'm saying that apps are not the best approach to learning Spanish? So, what I'm going to tell you is something that's going to assist you in helping you to use the app, but also to have a better understanding of how you can teach your child Spanish. So let me remind you, you are probably your child's first teacher. Most often, moms are the parents in the household that teach language. It's not to exclude dads, but moms typically spend more time with the children, and so they typically are the example or the model that children hear when it comes to language learning. So how did you teach your child their first language? You spoke the language around them. Long before they were able to understand you or hold a conversation with you, you surrounded your child with the language. That's exactly what you want to do with Spanish. It doesn't matter whether or not you understand everything. What matters is the amount of exposure that your child has to Spanish on a daily basis. So how can you do that? Put the music on in the car in Spanish. Sing along when you happen to run across a song that's familiar to you. If you listen to the radio on a daily basis, you'll notice that it's very repetitive. The same top hits will play over and over again. Now, these may not be the vocabulary words that you want your children to learn depending on the type of radio that you listen to. So what I'm going to recommend is that if you use Spotify, for example, that you find a channel that allows you to play nursery songs in your car as often as possible when you're in the vehicle with your children. This will allow them to get their ears attuned to hearing Spanish on a daily basis. Pretty soon, both of you will be singing the songs regardless of whether you know what the words mean. The next thing that you want to do is have conversations as best as you can around them. Use all the Spanish words that you know, even if you're speaking in Spanglish. It's okay. You want them to simply hear a new way to express an idea. The next thing that I would tell you to do is put the TV on for them. You don't have to sit your child in front of a television in order for them to gain the benefits of hearing the language coming from the TV. Find a TV show that you think is child appropriate based on the time of day that it's offered and the channel that it's on. I always recommend watching cartoons in Spanish or finding movies that are child appropriate in Spanish that you already know are appropriate because you've seen the movies in English. These are just some ways to introduce Spanish to your children without having to worry about whether or not you speak the language. Now, how do you use the app to support that process? As I mentioned, Spanish language apps are designed to be supplemental. Use the app to learn vocabulary that you know that you're going to use. Maybe you want to use it to learn vocabulary for kitchen items, or vocabulary for items that you find in the bathroom, or vocabulary that introduces numbers and colors and things that you know that you'll use with your children. That's how you should use a Spanish language app to help your child learn Spanish. So before we go, I want to leave you with 4 expressions that you can use this week to help your children learn Spanish. This week's topic is bedtime. What better way than to use Spanish at bedtime? We often create habits at bedtime that are ideal for adding Spanish. So here are a few expressions that you can use with your children this week, and I would love for you to share in the comments how your children responded to you using these expressions. The first expression is es hora de dormir. Es hora de dormir. It's time to sleep. Acuéstate. Acuéstate. Go to sleep. ¿Quieres leer un libro? ¿Quieres leer un libro? Do you want to read a book? ¿Quieres un cuento? ¿Quieres un cuento? Do you want a bedtime story? Dulces sueños. Dulces sueños. Sweet dreams. Thank you again for joining me for this week's lessons. And if you have a particular question that you'd like me to answer while you're on your journey to helping your child learn Spanish, please feel free to leave it in the comments below. Hasta la próxima semana. Until next week. Adios.